Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. Yes, we're not on air quite. It is a bonus show for us ahead of the course, a massive week in store of all things Tottenham. It's a chance for me to bring on some of the more, and don't say in a disrespectful way, the calm, the composed, the level-headed nature of our community in this fan base to see where we are as a football club going into a very big week for Tottenham, where all eyes, of course, are turning very much on Europa League and pretty much a lot of that being the crux of Spurs' season now to come. Listen, if you're with us for the very first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms, we're of course on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're on Blue Sky too. You can see, for those that are watching this show from the background behind you, no, I'm not in my usual setting. It's currently a weekend of chaos for us here, as I've got my son's second birthday in motion pretty much in the next day or so we're prepping for that. I'll let you decide if it's a weekend or off being Spurs, with that being the case. Back on the show, look, the man who always is keeping you up to date on all things Tottenham with match day reaction and more. David Harris is back on. Dave, how are you? Lovely to have you here.
No, thanks very much for having me again. I really do appreciate it. Back to full health, which is absolutely great. I don't think it's going to be a weekend enough for you, Ricky. However, I think you'd probably much rather be at a Spurs game or doing your stream. And I do think it's probably less stressful than a 2-year-old's birthday party. But look, happy birthday to your son, and hopefully you have a great weekend as a family.
Absolutely. Look, stress-free Spurs. What more can I ask for? A man that we also love having this show. We've got the wonderful Mitch Fretton. Always some great takes on the YouTube scene. Mitch, how are you? Love to see you back.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Not too bad. Feels like it's been a little stint since I've been on. So yeah, really appreciate you having me back on for a very rare recorded show, which is I'm sure a nice change of pace for you.
Absolutely.
And we can just focus on actually talking about Tottenham rather than got half an eye on what people are saying in the comments and everything else in between. But yeah, do you know what? I know I'm probably in a little bit of a different situation to you life-wise, but I'm very much looking forward to a weekend without Tottenham actually, before we head straight back into it next week with a very big game. But yeah, looking forward to chatting about a whole host of different things, and yeah, thanks once again for having me back on.
Pleasure. And one man that always, whenever he comes onto here, and I've listened to him for the last 7, 8, 9 years over many different platforms, is one that I always listen to and think, God, I wish I could be as calm as him. Put him and Jason in the same room. God, it would be therapy that you would never need to ever switch off from. It must mean that I've got back Vass Koni from Dr Tottenham. Vass, how are you? Lovely to see you.
Yeah, great to be back, Ricky. Thanks for having me on. And I'm sure you planned this because Spurs can't lose this weekend, so I'm a safe bet right now.
I know there's all that joke, Vass, whenever you came on that you was the curse as to why Spurs weren't winning games, and you said, Rick, you just have to take me off permanently until something massively changes. But I think we said that 4 or 5 years ago, Vass, didn't we? And what's gone on since? I mean, it's
well, I think we have had a couple of wins since when I have been on, so I think we've broken the curse, but it always just feels like it's always there in the background. And given our home form of late, it seems as though we're losing every other week anyway, so it doesn't really matter anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll definitely address that during the show in terms of the home form. But I think that for every Spurs fan out there, that they know how big this week for Spurs is, of course, to come. Obviously, look, it is about, for Spurs now, you'd feel that road to Bilbao, and the fact that it is now very much, I think, for a lot of fans out there, Europa League or bust. Of course, we've just come off the back in this previous week of that defeat to Man City, where Ange Postecoglou named a front three aged of 19, 20 and 23. He handed 3 big names a rest, as we know. And I think to City's delight, they didn't have to come up against the likes of starting the game, Heung-Min, Son, Dejan Kulusevski, to be fair, have been players that have really hurt Pep Guardiola's men in the past, that's for sure. But, I think, again, one of the takes was that Spurs in that City game, they actually aged their second youngest side in the Premier League of an average age of just 23 years and 243 days old. That was only toppled by the team they lined up at Sheffield Wednesday all those years back in September of 1992. I just wonder, coming over to you to start, if we can, Dave, whether that was maybe a missed opportunity or one that, again, maybe shines a light on just how big this next week is for Tottenham with AZ Alkmaar on the horizon, and the fact that it does feel maybe Ange hedged his bets to keep as many players as he could fit for what we know is one of 2 big games, not just for him, but of course for the club season right now.
Yeah, I think, look, where my problem comes in is I think you could have made them rotations against Ipswich Town and got still made a good go of that game and put points on the board, but then still put your strongest team out against Man City, because you still have 8 days between now and the AZ Alkmaar game, or 7 days. So they still have a lot of rest in between now and then. So I think that's where many fans' sort of confusion comes in. And I do think, like you said, maybe a bit of a missed opportunity. Don't get me wrong. I think we had enough chances on the day to try and take something from it. But I just think if we started with someone like Jed Spence up against Stoke, you might have nullified that threat. Son, starting in there as well. Kulusevski, I can understand, but him and Son, to be fair, have played probably some of the most minutes in the squad, so they were due a rest. But why not rest them against Ipswich? So I think, there was maybe questions around that, but then also maybe some of the substitutions, bringing off James Maddison, Wilson Udebur, when they were having an impact for Tottenham Hotspur going forward. So I think many Spurs fans are probably a little bit bamboozled around the selection and the starting lineup against Man City and maybe the substitutions. I think many Spurs fans would agree. You go with your strongest lineup against Man City, and Ipswich should be the game where you make rotational changes. So I think there's a bit of confusion around that. And yeah, you can say, Ange's putting these baskets all in Europa League, but I think that's a dangerous game to play. I think momentum counts come the business end of the season. If you have good momentum in the league, I think it counts and carries over into the cup competitions. I also think momentum is what actually eventually gets you over the line. I think we learned that with the Champions League. We were having a poor league run. We got to the final by hook or crook, but we didn't have enough momentum to carry us over the line, whereas Liverpool did. And I think we learned that. So for me, I think if we really want to get over the line, the two have to go side by side. It's not a case where we can just sack off the league now. We're in the bottom half. I think we're 9 points cut adrift to the top half of the table. And no Spurs fan is enjoying being down here. For me, I think we need to try and, climb as much as we can up that league table and try and salvage a respectable league finish. I think we can do that with managing Europe as well, now that we're getting a lot more players back. It's just about, sometimes is it a case of too many cooks spoil the broth, like, the Man City Ipswich game. We had a lot of players back, a lot of rotations we could make, but did Ange necessarily make the right decisions with having them options? And I think many fans would probably argue not. But it is come to a point where if we want European qualification next season, we have to put all of our eggs in the Europa League basket. We're not going to make that through the league now. So we have to go and win this Europa League. And I think the real importance around it is, I think if we don't win the Europa League and we finish in the bottom half of the table, I think then you sort of worry about, well, what players can Tottenham attract to this club in the summer in terms of caliber of what we really need to sort of kick on. I think it also has connotations in terms of your transfer budget this summer available to you if you don't have European football next season. But the biggest thing is a lot of this young core to the squad that we're developing, a lot of it's going to have to go out on loan next season when you have half the games as well. So there's a lot of complexity and probably a lot of difficulties for this club to work out over the summer if we don't get European football. And that's why all of our eggs have to be in the Europa League basket. We have to go and win it. And I also think if Ange Postecoglou wants to guarantee his job for next season, I also think he has to win it as well, because I think he made a rod off his own back when he said, I always win in my second season. And don't get me wrong, I know the connotation around it. He wasn't saying, I'm going to guarantee you a trophy this season. He's just saying, fact, I always win in my second year. That's what he has done. But I think, Spurs fans, we like to take messages and put our own spin on them. And I think it's been taken out of connotation a large. And I think it's been held to that standard, quite frankly. So I think all in all, we have to go and win this Europa League, Ricky.
I mean, look, I think the fact of the matter is coming around to that point, as Dee's mentioned there, Mitch, Ange would, I don't think, ever publicly admit that he's prioritising one competition over another. He certainly dismissed that notion of it when actually been asked in recent pressers. But there was that feeling, I think, when you look at the selection that we had against Manchester City and the idea of the fact that with the team that he assembled for that game, it was the opportunity to really build up some minutes, some sharpness in players that maybe hadn't had those minutes. The likes, like we said, of James Maddison, of Wilson Odobert, and that we know for Spurs, of course, where the game on Thursday and obviously quick session of that, we've got a Sunday game as well, means that with Bournemouth and Fulham also on the rise in the Premier League, there's still going to be some tricky battles for Spurs to try and face between now and the end of the season. You have to also merge into that the second leg against AZ and how that's going to fall. So how do you look at the way in we're lining up for it, Mitch, now? Do you also feel that it's almost Europa League or bust and that's Tottenham's season? Or do you feel like, as David's mentioned there, we're going to have to find a way of juggling the two, if that's possible?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the Europa League is the big priority. All you got to do is look at the league table. There's 11 games left in the season. We're 11 points off sixth place Newcastle. And we still have a lot of tough games to play. We've still got to go to Chelsea. We've still got to go to Liverpool. We've got a few other tricky ones in there to navigate as well. So it's not going to be an easy end to the finish. And if you're looking at it from a realistic standpoint, whether we'd be able to turn points around compared to the teams above us to be able to challenge for any of those European places, it's very, very unlikely. But then on the other side of things, you look at it, you're playing for pride still. You still want to finish as high as you can in the table. If you can get into that top half, obviously that's where Tottenham should be at the very minimum. So you don't dismiss the Premier League games completely. However, I will say that I probably agree with Ange resting a few players against City. And look, ultimately, we probably all came away from that City game thinking that we deserved at least a draw out of it after the second half performance and the chances that were created in the second half. It's just that first half was really, really poor. They scored their goal there, and that was all they needed in the end, which couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. So it's very difficult, but I do think long term going into the Europa League games that we will see the benefits of it, having given rest to the likes of Kulusevski, to Son. And I agree with what a lot of people have said, and say if there was one not to rest, it would perhaps be Jed Spence. One, because he's been our best player over the last couple of weeks, or if not months. And two, I think he does a much better job at dealing with Jeremy Doku, who I know Liverpool won the game against Man City a couple of weeks ago, but Doku was all over Trent and made him look horrible defensively. And I just feel like Spence is very obviously a much better one-on-one defender against that type of player. So there's a very, very fine balance at the moment for Ange between not making it seem like he's just completely putting all his eggs in one basket, but given the connotations that he is taking the Europa League very, very seriously. And we said at the start of the season to each other, like, ultimately, I'd rather finish outside of the European place if it means we win a trophy, and we've got one chance left to do that. And the benefit of it is, if we win that trophy, we qualify for the Champions League as well. So there's a lot still to play for, in the sense that it is probably, out of the competitions we've been in this year, we're still in the one that holds the most value and the biggest one, and probably the most meaningful one if we were to win it. So yeah, full steam ahead on that, I say, and obviously don't give up on the Prem games and finish as high as we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think we make some interesting points so far here with regards to how Spurs are going to be looking, how this season does pan out. I mean, Vass, to bring you in, we know this is Spurs' last chance for a genuine full week of training before we'll need to continue to use this growing squad to its fullest, really. You know, in the space of the days we've got coming up, we know we've got some real big challenges. We've obviously got to try and tackle this double-legged tie against AZ Alkmaar, which I say for many out there is going to be the biggest two games of the season. In combination with that, we're hoping in the next 7 to 12 days, we're going to get back the likes of Dominic Solanke, who I think we all can agree was a big miss against City. I think, you know, for City to have Haaland and for us not to have Solanke, he may have been the difference maker. You're looking at potentially Romero, Van der Ven, that may also return to this squad. So it does feel like now, Vass, this is the time for results. You're in the same feeling with the guys, where it just feels this Europa League naturally is taking priority given what's at stake?
I think it's been that way for a few weeks, if I'm totally honest with you, maybe the last couple of months. The form in the Premier League has been poor, no question about it. We know there's mitigating factors. The injuries have taken their toll.
Yep.
And whatever your view on Ange at the moment, you cannot deny that those things have an impact on a team's performance. You've only got to look at Arsenal now, 4 players out, and they're already crying about their season being over. Man City had a few defenders out not that long ago, and Pep was crying, I just want my players back. You know, injuries play their part. So for a while now, I think until we can get the squad back together and back in one piece, Europa League has been the priority. And it's been evident since the early games of that competition that Ange has been taking it very seriously. In fairness to him, he's taken all the cups seriously. We've just been unfortunate in the domestic cups that we came up against Villa at probably the wrong time for us. They're a very tough opponent, especially at their ground. And of course, Liverpool, best team in Europe right now, and maybe Real Madrid alongside. And we came unstuck at their place. So it's been tough getting knocked out of those two competitions, but Europa League has been the priority. It should be the priority. That doesn't mean we necessarily have to bin off the Premier League, but I'm not as concerned about where we finish exactly. I don't believe we're getting relegated, and whether we finish 13th or 9th, for me, doesn't make that much difference. Probably 9th will look better, the aesthetics of it, I get it. But I think the Europa League has to be the one that we go for. And that's not to say that it's a given we're going to win it, but the return of all these players that you just mentioned, Rick, I think will put us in good stead for the remaining fixtures in that competition. And I get what Dave was saying earlier about the resting of players, and maybe we could have rested against Ipswich as opposed to Man City. But I mean, just think about that for a moment. Yeah, let's assume you rested players against Ipswich and we didn't get the result because you've messed about with the team, right? And then you bring the players back for City, and City being City, no guarantee we get the result there. And then all of a sudden, you've got 2 poor results instead of 1 defeat. And talk about momentum. Momentum's suddenly gone. So I get that Ange is being paid to take these decisions. I agree with Mitch. I think probably the only player he shouldn't have rotated was Jed Spence, because I do believe that Sonny and Decky have needed resting for a few weeks now. And even though Sonny had some good impact against Ipswich and did okay when he came on against City, Decky, on the other hand, has been struggling. And aside from his goal against Ipswich, he's really not contributed very much at all. And I love Decky, but even when he came on against City, I think he was just stifling our forward play.
Yeah.
So those players needed resting, and probably Porro still needs to be rested. And that's why I believe Jed Spence, of all of them, was the only one that shouldn't have been rested. He should have gone over to the right back side and done something against Doku, hopefully. Even though I do believe Jed Spence probably plays better on the left as a left back, but that's another story for another day. So there's a lot to take in, and Mitch is quite right. We've got a lot of hard fixtures coming up in the Premier League, especially away from home, going to Liverpool, going to Chelsea, going to Villa, going to Fulham. You know, we've got some tough old games coming up. So, yeah, we've got to try and balance that. Of course we do. But Europa League definitely should be the priority, and fingers crossed it materialises. And you've only also got to go back to prior years when we've been successful and won trophies. It's been at the expense of our league form. See where we finished in all of those years, even going back to the early 80s when we won the FA Cup and the UEFA Cup. See where we finished in those seasons too. It's weird how it works out like that.
Yeah, I mean, it has been, as we've all discussed, it's been a challenging season, a frustrating season, and one that we're not used to in terms of definitely our Premier League position. I think, you know, for all of us to be seeing Spurs where they are in that Premier League table is, look, for me personally, it's hard to keep sharing that when we keep having these weekly shows and to be discussing it. Just sticking with you, Vass. I mean, you spoke about the manager there briefly, Ange Postecoglou, and look, I think I've got 3, I would say very, how do I put this? 3 fans that have followed the club for a very, very long time, that are very acutely aware of the history of Tottenham, what Tottenham are about, and have been around the block when it comes to Tottenham for a while, right? When I say this, that I think on Ange Postecoglou's position, there'll be different feelings of where people are right now with him. I think the general consensus is that he's going to be here until the end of the season, no matter what. Look, I think if he wins the... I just say that breaking news is not anything to do with Ange Postecoglou. This is a pre-record, as you're aware. But the reality is that it does feel for many out there that there will have to be some form of a review in the summer. I mean, look, Vass, you've been going to Spurs for a very, very long time. I don't want to age you, but when I say to you then, that defeat against Man City was our 7th home defeat for Spurs, which is the joint most in a 20-team Premier League season that we've had. And you've got to go back, I think, since 96, 97 for that home form. And I think, you know, you're looking at our home form in general, which hasn't been good enough. 5 wins, 2 draws, 7 defeats in the 14. What's your gauge, Vass, on Ange for you? I mean, have you seen enough for you progression, even if Spurs weren't to win the Europa League this summer, that you feel this has got more legs? Or do you feel there needs to be some kind of a review in the summer for you? How do you feel?
Yeah, there's times when I feel like maybe he's not cut out for it. And then there's other times when I see glimpses of the way the team plays and I'm encouraged by it, because that's the sort of front foot football that I want to see Spurs deliver. And when it works really well. I mean, earlier in the season, we were smashing 4 past Villa, 4 past West Ham, 3 past United, 4 past City. It kind of works. But then you have these anomalies, losing at home to Ipswich and to Leicester, both unacceptable. The home defeats are tough to take because there's a pattern evolving now. And if you lose the home support, you're making life difficult for yourself. So that is a concern for sure. But look, if he goes all the way, gets a little bit of momentum now towards the end of the season, let's say we finish 9th or 10th, and then he does go on and win the Europa League, God willing. What does the club do then? Are they going to really sack the first manager to win a trophy since 2008?
The most successful.
And the first manager to win a European trophy since 1984? I mean, that's got to be madness. And the other thing that's kind of working in Ange's favour, and I've mentioned this on our podcast as well, is there seems to be something happening at the club where they have at last committed to a project. Now, you could argue that they've committed to a project under the wrong manager, and that's people's opinions, and they're entirely appropriate to have those opinions. However, they've done something this time where they seem to be committed to a project. They've launched projects in the past, but they've never really stuck to them. But there's something, it feels like to me anyway, there's something going on there. So that could be buying Ange some goodwill. And then the other thing you look at is, if you do get rid of him, who do you bring in? Now, everybody's default answer these days seems to be Iraola at Bournemouth. But who's to say that he's not going to be approached by other teams? Maybe City have had enough of Pep, or, maybe one of the other teams up there decide to go for him, or even a Spanish team. He might want to go back to Spain. You don't know. So that's not a given. So depending on who's available, that will determine how the club treats the situation with Ange. But yeah, for sure, it will need to be reviewed in the summer. And then depending on all those factors will be what determines how the club proceeds.
What's your gut feeling on it, Vass? You think it'll be the Spurs head coach next season as we will record this show?
I think, much to the annoyance of a lot of fans, I think he will be.
Okay.
Me personally, I'm happy to maybe, well, depending on how we finish the season, then I would be happy to maybe give him the summer window and see how it goes. And, you review it again in October, November.
Yep. I've got to say, I'm so glad we're having this conversation when we're not having to do a live show, because comments would be
I've been slated by now. Yeah, everybody will be telling me that.
You say that, Vass. It's interesting. I still feel there's, and this might annoy a lot of people out there, I still feel there is a lot of people in the fan base, maybe not all of them, but there's still a lot of fans that do retain some support for Ange Postecoglou, because as I've said, frequently throughout shows on Last One on Spurs, I've heard you guys say over at Dr Tottenham as well, Vass. I think, like many managers, it is not Ange Postecoglou's fault. I think there's been times where he's not been given the adequate calibre of players to be able to play the way he wants to play. I think there's an argument there. I think you can't get away from the fact, as you've said there, Vass, there has to be context applied to that 9 to 12 week period where he has had an injury crisis like probably no other manager has had this season, and in the nature of the calibre of players that he's lost to try and compete with is very, very hard to do. I know there's that argument around the fact of who has been causing those injuries, which is a completely different discussion, and whether there needs to be some blame applied to Ange for some of the reason why players are injured. But I've got to say, coming over to you, Dave, and look, you've been here with me a lot during this season. I don't think I've ever seen a discussion point on Ange Postecoglou raise so many different feelings. There's a real split right now. I'll probably ask you the same question, D. You were quite passionate a few weeks ago on where we stand with Ange, and we are coming into a real crucial period with him now. Obviously, this double-legged header in the round of 16 AZ Alkmaar to come. We speak about our league form not being anywhere near the level. I think as well, when you get into the case as well, looking at the fact that and again, this isn't a pretty stat that I'm going to read here, Spurs have not scored a second-half goal in the Premier League since that defeat to Liverpool, and that's in 5 matches. It's our worst run in terms of goal scoring at home in the Premier League since 2006. I just wonder for you, Dave, where are you in terms of Ange and his future, and can you see him being here longer than the end of the season, depending on what happens?
Look, when it comes to Ange Postecoglou, I think we failed massively in the transfer window. I've said that time and time again on here, Ricky. I've repeated that. I think they maybe got Ange Postecoglou mixed up. For me, Ange Postecoglou isn't your sort of long-term project manager. He is a win now sort of manager. He's come in here and the first thing he starts talking about is wanting to win trophies. Whereas with our recruitment, we've took a much longer-term approach with our recruitment rather than bringing in players for the here and now. And I don't think the recruitment and the manager matches up, which means then if this is going to work, they have to give Postecoglou time to develop these youngsters and mold them into what he needs them to be. Are the board going to give him that time? Well, that's where the big question is. For me, look, when I look at the whole season, I think there is some good to take from it, but I think there's also a lot of question marks around it. I think, the League Cup run was a very good run, enjoyable. You take out Man City, Man United, and I know we end up getting beat by a very quality Liverpool team, in the end. But in years gone by, as soon as we meet one of them teams, we're straight out of the competition. We knocked out 2 on the route and beat Liverpool in the first leg. I think that, and we all know our problems in the cup over the last couple of years. We've get knocked out at early stages, so that's been a good high. I think, in terms of the European run, a lot of the youngsters have come to the fore. They've come good. They've developed under Ange Postecoglou. He's given more youngsters an opportunity from the academy and ones that we've brought in than any other manager since Pochettino. I think we've played more teenagers this year than any other football club in the Premier League. So I think that's also a good sign. And when they've come in, they've looked like they can play this system. I think that is a huge benefit for these guys coming through, and will give others hopefully more encouragement coming through. And I think, if Ange Postecoglou can guide us to a semi-final, I think you look at it at the end of the season, 2 cup semi-finals, if we can save face it to a degree in league and climb into 9th or 10th, I think he does save his job and go into next season. Also, if you look at it from a board's point of view, when he's been asked about transfers, losses of games, etc., he hasn't come out and bemoaned his luck in the transfer window market. He hasn't put any shade on the board. He's took all responsibility in the press conference. He is the front man. He's soaking up, and to a large degree, for a large part of this season, he's managed to actually take the attention off the ownership up until recently, and he's managed to put it all on him. And I think that to a degree, the board will respect that. But it is coming to a point, when you look at the amount of managers under the longevity of the ownership, it's roughly every 2 years we sack a manager and go in a different direction. It's also approaching that. It's just whether Daniel Levy really has the balls to stick by Postecoglou heading into next season. Look, when I also listen to a lot of Postecoglou's press conferences this year, a lot of it does seem to be talking about the long term. He's mentioned about wanting to reap the rewards of developing Gray and Bergvall and players like that. He's always spoke about when he gets his injuries back, players back from injury, and stuff like that, how good we can be. So for me, I think there's an element that he's expecting to be here next season. I think maybe he has them reassurances, and to a degree, I think they might roll the dice and let him go into next season. I think they will take into account the injuries, which, I think Vass put it brilliantly. We sit here and say Postecoglou has to find a way. But yet you've got the likes of Arteta, Guardiola out here moaning about a look at the hit that they're taking in terms of, or Guardiola has taken in terms of results with his injury crisis and stuff. So it does go to show how far it can affect you, and it affects you even more as a Tottenham manager because the squad depth is never there as much as them big clubs. So it's a lot harder to try and solve the problems and put points on the board like they can through these problems. So I think taking all that into account, I just think Ange Postecoglou might survive and get himself into next season. But I do think performances on the pitch have to pick up. I think results have to pick up. And I do think he has to get to a European semi-final. In terms of some of the goal-scoring stats that you read out there, Ricky, and, the amount where we're not scoring, I've said that it's because, for me, it's down to the quality of the front line. Like we've seen against Man City, right? I think we create some good chances. But in that decisive moment, and this is what I've always talked about, that's where the rawness or the inexperience of these players come in. Wilson Odegaard at the back post against Man City. Any player that has experience, they're anticipating them defenders missing that and it coming to them. and they're ready to put it away. I think Wilson Odeburn, it's not the first time it happened against Newcastle earlier on the season. He doesn't anticipate it, so he's almost reacting late to the situation, and that's the difference. And I think if we really want Postecoglou to kick on next season, I think they have to bring in some quality players over this summer transfer windows of a certain proven quality if they wanted to kick on next season. If they don't see themselves doing that and they want to continue down this route by bringing in more young players and stuff, I think that's then where they might actually have a decision to make. Do you go and get someone that is more known to working with youngsters, bring them through like a Bielsa? Can you attempt a Pochettino, which you're probably not because he's taken United States to America? But I think that's the only way they change it if they don't plan on bringing in a bit more quality for him this summer, because they know they're setting them up for failure if they don't.
So, Dave, your feeling is, just to be clear before I move on to Mitch, there, you think for you, if he gets to a minimum semi-final, are you saying regardless of what happens in the league form, you think he'll still be the Spurs manager as you go into next season?
Yeah, I think so. I think the club would look at it and go, well, do you know what? If we can keep everybody fit, add a couple of bits to it, we might just have enough to get over the line the following season. Because I do think you can't turn your nose up at 2 cup semi-finals. Look at the embarrassments we've suffered in Europe in years gone by. Defeats to the likes of NS Mora, Vitesse. Look at the embarrassments we've suffered in the League Cup, the FA Cup, some of the exits. This season, so far the 2 cup exits, we've been knocked out to Premier League teams that are probably better than us and more advanced in their projects than us.
What's getting over the line, Dave, next season? What does that mean? Does that mean getting over the line top 4? Does that mean top 6? What does that mean in your mind when getting over the line?
Not getting over the line, winning a trophy. I think Postecoglou's proven, that even with a bit of a depleted squad, he can still guide you close. And I think, therefore, for me, that just tells me if you bring in the right players, because the difference between us and Liverpool is we were just outplayed. They had much more quality on the pitch. Them players have been together a lot longer than what our players have been in general. And I think that was the difference. And I think if we just had a bit more quality, which is something I've been banging on about since we've signed Postecoglou, I don't think we're too far away. When we go into the next segment and we break down the squad, I actually don't think it's too far away.
It's interesting. I think for me, I'm only talking as a fan here. I mean, I may be separated from what the club might think they're doing. I can't see a way in which fans would tolerate another domestic campaign like we've had this season for next season. I just can't see that. I mean, I just think also the indication of that is when you see so many empty seats that we saw against Man City. Whatever you think about maybe, again, the City side that was out there, and again, they were missing a couple of players. Holland was back. That's Man City at home for Tottenham. That is normally one of the biggest games of the season. City, as we play that game, were 4 times champions in a row. Normally that game would be a sellout. I appreciate it's an evening fixture, which isn't the most easiest game to get to on an evening. I get that. But I think it's a lot right now with fans where they're at. When you see a lot of tickets now and fans at home aren't really attending at the moment.
But I think that's more in protest to Daniel Levy rather than Ange Postecoglou. I think there's a lot of realizations on, from the fans' part that it's not all on Ange Postecoglou.
No, of course,
the amount of injuries that he suffered. And if you don't have the right transfer window, which a lot of the transfer window is about, planning for these sort of situations. And when you don't bring in the right recruitment, you're setting the manager up for failure. And when you've had Postecoglou, Jose Mourinho and Conte have all won at various other clubs, bar Tottenham Hotspur, I think more and more fans are becoming awake to it. That's not the manager's fault, and he does need a lot more help. So I think, what you're seeing is more actually in protest to the ownership rather than actually Ange Postecoglou. I think even many people that say getting gone, I think a lot of them also realise he hasn't been helped the way he should have here.
No. But also, I think, Dave, you make a really good point as well that when we talk about, I think Vass actually said it, the feeling out there is they've finally committed to a project, and some fans' feelings are whether they've committed to the project under the wrong man, which again is a conversation that we'll see how this pans out between now and the rest of the season. Mitch, to bring you in, I think the last time we had you on the show and talk about Ange Postecoglou, you were slightly wavering at that time. This was a man that you was very much vehemently in defence for. As we said, our home form this season hasn't been anywhere near good enough. 14 home games. We've won 5, we've drawn 2, we've lost 7. Again, to caveat that, at the same time, we've only lost by the odd goal, if you want to say that, in 6 of the home defeats, if you want to put it out there. But we've also only won 1 against a team in a top 10. That's been Aston Villa, who are currently sitting in that top 10 just. Where are you, Mitch, at the moment with regards to Ange? Do you feel it is pretty much now all on the Europa League? Is that what's going to maybe get him another season? Or do you maybe think like the guys, if he has a decent run of competition, if the league form does pick up, he probably will start next season. What's your gut feeling on it for you, Mitch?
I think providing that we get through the Alkmaar tie, I think his job's safe going into next season, because you do all of this build up and this hype and all of this focus on Europa League. If you go out in the first knockout stage, then especially against a team that you're heavily favoured to beat and have beaten in the league phase already this season, then that raises, I think, a few alarm bells, particularly with Solanke, Romero and Van de Ven coming back, and you have a pretty much full strength squad at that point. But look, I was wavering last time I was on the show. I was sort of starting to think, is it the right guy to put the money and the time behind for a project? But I think I've probably backtracked on that view a bit more now. And I'm definitely leaning more towards he deserves next season as well. But of course, there's a lot more contingencies that come with that next season. If he leads us into the next season, it's his third season in charge of Tottenham. All of a sudden, you can't start using the excuse that he is in a project with Tottenham anymore, because 3 years is you sit there and you go from thinking, well, maybe even 2 seasons isn't really enough to build a project for a club, building it from the ground up after losing the club's greatest ever player and goal scorer. But when you get into the third season, if your league form is similar to what it is this season, if we're still having the same amount and severity of injuries that we have this season, and if we go, let's say, out of one of the cups very early, particularly if we don't have any European football next season, then there is almost no defence to that. So
does that worry you, Mitch, as you make that point there? I hope I'm coming back in on that. Does that worry that already to some degree? If you go and sack him early into next season, are you already writing off next season, because you then got to give the next manager the time then to try and embed the squad? Where the argument may be, if they were to evaluate things at the end of the season, everybody's not in agreement, and you bring somebody in the summer, they've got that pre-season at least to work with the players to try and get them in tune for how they want to play. Do you see where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah, I get what you mean entirely, and I think, for me, my belief is a lot of these are hypotheticals that I don't necessarily think will happen. It's more a case of, I've stuck behind Ange for the last 2 seasons since he's come in. I've seen the best of him, I've seen the worst of him, and I've come out of the other side now that we've got this squad back, thinking that I'm still behind him. So, I want to see that next level of backing and that next level of support given to him when things do reset next season. Obviously, look, my number one priority is I want to win the Europa League this season, and I want to win it so bad that it's very, very difficult for me to put it into words. And unfortunately, if we do end up not going all the way to Bilbao and winning it, and we get knocked out, then there's going to be criticism of Ange. There's going to be anger at him more so than a lot of people have already. And I think that's absolutely fine, because we would have gone another season without a trophy. We would have had one of our worst league campaigns ever in the Premier League era. And that's cause for concern, injuries or not, because everybody has their own opinions on the injuries and what causes them and how that's affected our season. So I just feel like, Ricky, we're missing a couple of pieces that would make us a really, really strong squad rather than team. Because if you look at the team with your strongest starting 11 and you put Romero back in there and you put Van de Ven in there and you have a Jed Spence now who has been phenomenal, pairing Udogie at fullback, and you have a Fitson and a Kulusevski and a Slank, like it's a very, very good team on paper. But let's say you add a proper number 6 into that team, and you perhaps do manage to go out in the summer and you sign your replacement. And when I say replacement, I mean an elite replacement for Son for whatever happens to him. Then I feel like you have the facilities and the tools and no excuses to go into the next season with everything possible. And yeah, like I've said, it's hypotheticals. If that doesn't work out, then Ange inevitably will and probably should get the sack. But I'm not at that. And to give you a short answer to a very long explanation, I think he will go into next season still as our manager.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to really what happens, obviously, between now and the end of it in terms of that Europa League. And I think it's also the manner of these next couple of games that we've got to come. Mitch, just on that point you said there, I think we're going to have to see a level of performance that maybe arguably we didn't see to some degree at Villa and Liverpool. I just think for me, I know for a lot of fans out there, it was the way we exited both cups. And I take Vass's point on board that maybe we faced Villa at a tricky time. But when you look at Villa's form as well, being there domestically 10th in the table, And I've seen Villa, obviously at home, not had the greatest run, but Liverpool are a dangerous side whoever you're going to come against. I think, again, it was for a lot of fans out there, the nature of those performances and why so many were disgusted by how he exited both cups. But again, to put, as we said, context into that, that 9-12-week period, we lost a number of the key players. And that's why, again, there's just, at the moment, as you guys will be acutely aware of in the Spurs community, there is so many mixture of opinions right there. There's some that don't feel Ange should even be in charge right now. There's some that will look to the end of the season. There is some that will be giving him that third year. But I think my worry is that we go in that third year with question marks and you sack him early. You've already written off next season because you're already searching for somebody else. And I think that's a question where, again, it will come down to really what the plan is. And I think, look, we're going to close very shortly on what you guys feel are the players that we need to target come the summer. Go on, Dave. Do you want to come back on very quickly?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in one quick question out there as well. What part does, if the squad are still behind him, have a part to play in terms of his future? In years gone by, come the end of Antonio Conte, come the end of Jose Mourinho, it's clear that the squad weren't having him any longer. They weren't pulling the weight for the manager. But when you hear the likes of Maddison and Kulusevski and other players come out and speak, they do speak about the injuries playing its part and stuff. And it does seem like a lot of these players are still on board with him despite the adversity we've gone through. So I just wonder, putting the question out there, how much does that play a factor in his future?
I think it's massive, Dave, because I think, as we saw really in those previous managers you've mentioned there, I think the degree of it always has been that, we've had this leadership group behind the scenes that I'm sure Daniel Levy has gone to in the past on these respective managers, whether it's Pochettino, Mourinho, Nuno, Conte, and got a feeling from the players. And Harry Kane at the time being the captain of the club, I'm sure would have given an indication as to whether some of these players are playing for those managers. And I think we've all seen down the years, whether it was under Mourinho, Conte, Nuno, I think we all got a gauge, even with Pochettino towards the end. Does Maurizio feel exhausted enough that he was going to get that back in? So I think it's a really tricky one. It's a discussion that could roll on so much. I just want to get you guys very quick views on the latest of where we are with Spurs chairman Daniel Levy. There was a report by Bloomberg earlier in the week, for those that had missed it, that reportedly Qatar are not showing any form of an interest right now with regards to potentially purchasing the football club. But over the past 18 months, investors, including US billionaires and private equity funds, have all begun discussions to buy a stake in Tottenham, with the end goal being full control of the football club. Now, the report from Bloomberg indicates talks broke down over Daniel Levy's high valuation, and because he wants to remain either as a significant investor or in charge of the sporting decisions via a lucrative contract, which is reportedly what people have said. Spurs declined to comment on any sales talks. The future for the role of Daniel Levy is understood to not be fundamental to any deal discussions, according to one person familiar with the situation. Investors have held talks with representatives of the Lewis family. However, discussions have consistently failed over confusion about who would control the club following any deal, and struggles to navigate the club's ownership structure. The people familiar with the discussions have said. Now, again, I made that point at the start of this point where I said that at the moment, QSI are currently not interested in a deal, according to the people familiar in the situation, despite holding talks with the club back in 2023. Now we've got quite a bit still to get to, so just a very quick round of the table on this. Vass, do you feel we're any closer to any potential sale with the football club as I read that out to you, or do you feel that we're going to be stuck in the ENIC Levy hamster wheel for the foreseeable?
Yeah, keep that wheel turning, Ricky. It's just, I can't see it happening unless a valuation is met for ENIC's value of the property. See, I'm referring to the club as a property. It is a bloody property.
It is a bloody property. It is a business venture.
That's me doing bloody mortgages all day long. That's what happens. So yeah, the valuation's got to be met, and it's the vibes are that he's not going to relinquish control. He'd like to stay around. Now, I'm no Levy fan. I've called on him a lot. I gave him credit where it was due during the stadium build and everything else that he's done for Spurs up to that point. But he's lost a hell of a lot of goodwill, and something needs to give. What that is, I'm not entirely sure. I get the change for Tottenham thing that's going on, and that banner that you put up earlier about the 24 seasons, 16 managers and 1 trophy. That is horrific. I mean, anybody else running a business and delivering that would have been sacked years ago. But he's not going to sack himself. He's not going to jog on just because we say so. All we can do is hope that something changes where the football club is run with the football team as a priority. Now, whether we'll get that under Levy or not, I'm not so sure. But then what is the alternative? I mean, we've got American owners proliferating English football at the moment. We've got 32% of football league teams owned by Americans. We've got 10 of the 20 Premier League clubs, I think, have got American ownership. And I'm not convinced that they are the answer, to be perfectly honest with you. We've seen the shenanigans that have gone on at other clubs. Probably Man United is the biggest case in point when the Glazers took over. I don't know how many Americans are actually tuned into the way football works over here. And then on the flip side, you've got, these oil-rich states with questionable human rights records and everything else. It's turning into a bit of a shit show. The ownership of the Premier League and much of English football will soon be outside of English hands. I don't know if that's good for the game, in all honesty. We have to mention PSR. It seems to be having some teeth of late. I mean, you've only got to look at Newcastle with their YPOTY owners. They haven't really been able to throw money at the problem. I don't think any new owner is going to be able to throw money at any problem for any club. So I'm just a little bit lost with it all, Rick. I don't really have an answer. I'm sort of find myself talking and not really giving you a proper answer to what your question. I think we do need change. We need Daniel Levy to change or step aside at the very least, which I think he's probably tried to do with some of the appointments. But I really don't know what the answer is.
But you can't see, Vass, to come back on this point, any change this summer? You feel there'll be no movement?
No, I don't. I can't see it happening that soon. You're talking about a massive deal, right? You're talking about £3-4 billion to take control of Tottenham now.
Yep.
And those things don't happen overnight, so this could drag on. So he'll be around for a little while longer, I think, Rick.
Is that your gauge as well, Mitch? Just to come on that point there, I've mentioned there. I mean, do you see anything fundamentally changing the course of the summer? I mean, many are saying, as Vass pointed out there, it'd be lovely for Daniel Levy to change. I mean, he's been at the club for 24, 25 years. I mean, he's had plenty of opportunity to change. And I think in the past where it's been suggested that he's, put the footballing business over to other people there, whether it's Scott Munn, whether it's obviously been Johan Lange. Well, obviously, we know he's still around because there's only reports weeks ago that he flew on a plane to Germany with Johan Lange to try and close the deal for Matis Tel. He come back without him and to Ange Postecoglou to get the deal over the line. So, I mean, just very quick on this, Mitch, do you see anything changing this summer when it comes to the ownership model of Tottenham?
No, absolutely not. It seems like Daniel Levy is sort of the caveat to any deal being made at the moment anyway. So if that's the case, I don't even know if I would want that to happen, because what really changes then? If we have a takeover and Daniel Levy is still running operations, I doubt very little actually changes, apart from maybe our owners put a little bit more money into a club. But yeah, I'd be stunned if anything did happen, to be honest with you, mate. I think it's all talk, all of these reports coming out every couple of weeks at the moment saying people are here holding talks with Tottenham and Daniel Levy. And the issue is, mate, he just wants so much that the people that are willing to sell the club, they want so much money for it. And I think any potential investors are so put off by the valuation that they're being given that
you think they're pricing it out, Mitch? You think they're pricing? Yeah. You think they're pricing other investors out?
If we sell it, what is it he's valuing the club at? Saying like 4.5 billion or something like that.
This is around in those regions. Yeah.
If and when the club does get sold, it won't be for that amount of money. So however long that takes for that price to come down is, but I'd be stunned if that happened this summer.
Yeah, I've got to say, one thing that I found just really disconnected. I'm also outside football. Isn't exclusive if you want one. I am into my boxing. I love boxing. And I watched the Eubank Ben press conference, which has been obviously fairly lively. But the one on Thursday, when it felt like it must have been put up there for Tottenham, who would have admitted, this paper forward to be read, was the fact that the way they described the venue, Dave, come over to you, it was almost like an entertainment venue. We've got Beyonce coming in the summer. We've got Kendrick Lamar coming in the summer. All very well kind of scripted in terms of the fact that, it's Formula One. We've got all these concerts happening, and lo and behold, you could think for any casual fan watching that isn't into sport or into Tottenham or anything, would just think, God, what an amazing entertainment venue. But then the sole focus kind of goes at there's a football club here. I mean, for any Tottenham fan watching that like me, man, it must have been an absolute disillusionment, the fact that there was not really a mention of the fact that this actually is a football club. It's actually a football club, which is, again, seems to become completely lost in that moment of when all that was being read out. I mean, very quickly for you on this, Dave, any real changes here across the summer? Are you frustrated the fact that it does appear Qatar have quietened this thing down? Or, I mean, to be fair, I don't know any real ownership that will be screaming right now to buy Tottenham, because if anything, like we said, you want to be keeping the price down as much as you can. And any interest to show publicly about it, it's going to even lead to that price being higher.
Yeah, just quickly on what you were saying about the entertainment value. I think, look, that's Tottenham fans' biggest gripe with the ownership. It almost feels like, when it comes to the football, we always have to take a hit or a sacrifice. But when it comes to all the business ventures like the Formula One ground underneath, the NFL pitch that comes out, the rugby league final, all the best in class of boxings, concerts, etc., there seems to be a lot more ambition on that side, and it doesn't quite add up. And I think that's where fans are getting disillusioned and thinking, well, are they running away with one side of it, forgetting about this side? And that's where all these protests are coming around in the first place. But look, when it comes to Daniel Levy, to be honest with you, I wonder, are we intentionally pricing people out of the market? So it's like, well, look, I'm interested in investment, but you can still put that out there, but price things so high, knowing it's never going to come. A part of me also looks at the structure, the ownership, the complexities, the amount of different companies involved with Tottenham Hotspur. You've got Tavistock, you've got Enid, you've got Daniel Levy also owns a percentage of the club. So I presume anyone that takes over will be taking over Joe Lewis's shares, but I don't think Daniel Levy personally wants to sell his. And I think, he will be around the football club. I also think that makes it difficult because many people want to come in and do what they want to do with the football club to a large degree. Then you look at all the subsidiaries underneath. You got Tottenham Hotspur Stadium Limited and everything else, different companies. And there's so many companies involved. I just wonder, is it that easy? Is it a case where you can buy the football club, but I still own the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium Limited and stuff like that? I just don't think it's as straightforward as many people think. And I think if it does get over the line, it's going to take a long time. But part of me also think it's set up like that, so it's almost impossible, for it to be taken over to a large degree. I think the fact that the Qataris have ruled themselves out maybe worries me a little bit. And the reason why I thought the Qataris maybe was the go-ahead, they're getting very unhappy with PSG. I think, you look at the true money at that project. I think that would excite many Spurs fans, hoping they would do the same here. But also there was an Air Jordan sponsorship knocking around, and I think maybe they were holding back as well. They were deciding between Tottenham and Chelsea, and I think maybe they were holding back to see if the Qataris could get hold of it because they have PSG, and they'd probably work with them at Tottenham. And I think maybe that they've ruled themselves out. I think, it strikes to me that Levy's going to be here and Joe Lewis and his family are going to be here for quite some time yet.
Yeah, I mean, what's also interesting is for those that have, I think Vass want to come back at that point. Go on, Vass, go for it.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Just to piggyback on what Dave said in terms of it being an entertainment venue. Listen, I think most Spurs fans wouldn't have a problem with the money being generated from the venue. After all, it's it's good business sense, right?
Of course.
Genius.
However, however, you have to show that you are prioritizing what's happening on the pitch. And what you want from Daniel Levy is for him to show the same energy and commitment to the football team as he did to the building of that stadium and everything around it. So if he can do that, I think Spurs fans wouldn't care too much. But the fact that they haven't managed to achieve that or anything close to it on the football pitch, that's what's causing the discontent.
100%. Absolutely spot on. For those that are wondering out there, Liverpool, West Ham and Brentford have now all confirmed frozen season ticket prices for next season. So it's a case saying over to you, Tottenham, and what they're going to do. I mean, I know there's a feeling out there that Spurs could freeze it for the next 5 years and many would still feel it's overpriced. So we'll see how that does come along and that's, again, another subject which will go on. And let's see if Tottenham will be making their moves when it comes to the ticket price and how that is going to be. Some positive news to bring to you. We've got some positive news we have, and that's news that Archie Gray has scooped the Young Player of the Year award at the London Football Awards in the last 72 hours. For Archie Gray, it's a proud award for him to win. The fact that, again, this is an award that's been won. It was up against Arsenal pair Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly. There was Watford's Rocco Vata in there and Romain Esse of Crystal Palace. Look, Gray featured in 33 of our 42 matches in all comps so far. He started 25. That includes starting 19 of our last 20 matches, 16 in the unfamiliar position of a centre-back. Archie follows in the footsteps of Harry Kane, who won the award in 2015, and Dele Alli as well, who scooped it back in 16 and 17. I think we've all very much, praised Archie to the rooftops, really, for how he's performed. And yeah, we hope that he's going to be one of a lot of these players that will be better for the experience of next season, because we've not really seen Archie featuring that role that I think many are excited to see him featuring, which will hopefully be that elusive number 6. We shall see. Talking about number 6s, I think we're going to close on the fact we want to ask you guys about the 3 positions that we see for the summer and what the most important would be, and maybe players you want to see let go. It's around the table on this quickly. We'll have to go. Let's start with Mitch on this. Mitch, do you have 3 positions of an area where you feel Tottenham will improve, and maybe some names that fans will be surprised to see leave this summer?
Oh, putting me on the spot. 3, realistically, 3 is probably a minimum that you'd want to bring in the summer. I think number 6 in midfield is a big priority for Tottenham this summer. Absolutely, 100% get a new midfielder in, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a few players head out from the area of the squad as well. There's a couple of very decent players out there that could be of use to Tottenham. Like Sabliba at Brighton, and I'm interested to see if we follow up that Cardoso deal at Real Betis and whether he comes in. I haven't watched too much of him, but he's another solid name that could potentially do a job. I'm sure there are more out there, but just to keep it brief, I'd go with that. I would go. I don't know what's going to happen with the Mattis Tell deal, but regardless, I feel like a striker should be an area that we look at. With the idea of perhaps moving Richarlison on this summer and replacing him, just because, as much as he wants to stay at Tottenham, as much as he wants to make it into the Brazil squad for the World Cup, he can't stay fit. And I feel like we've all been patient enough with him now. And I just feel like him coming back for, 2 or 3 games after being out for ages and then getting injured again, it's just, you can be the nicest bloke in the world, but you need to be available and ready to play for Tottenham, and he's not. So that's another area I'd look at. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the show, a Son replacement as a potential winger is one that I'd definitely be looking at. I know you look at the squad now and think we actually have quite a lot of wingers in the squad, and you say Son, you've got Hyuk at QPR, you've got Brennan Johnson, Timo Werner on loan, who obviously won't be staying at the club, or most people probably hoping he won't be staying at the club. Wilson Odebear as well, and the likes of Kulusevski and Tell can also play out wide as well. But I just feel like that elite winger replacement for Son is an area that eventually we're going to have to address. Whether we'll do that this summer is a completely different debate, but it's what I'd like to see us look at. Those are the 3 positions for me.
Just on Sonny, you brought him up, Mitch. There are reports out that Spurs would like to still extend Sonny's deal and keep him here until he retires. So, want to keep an eye on Heung-Min Son. I know many out there feel that we've really, to some degree, knackered Son out, if that's a term or phrase that you might want to use, or the fact we've overplayed Sonny, and we maybe coming to the later years of him. It'll be interesting to see what Son does do, because I think Son might have been a little bit frustrated that there wasn't a longer-term deal for him, whether he commit again for a further couple of years, or whether he does want to seek a new challenge, is one to keep an eye on, I'd say, with Sonny. There are reports that Spurs are looking to go back to Asia in the summer. They are looking at potentially Hong Kong being one of those destinations, as they are eyeing up a pre-season friendly with Arsenal. So you'd imagine we'll get more information on that in the next, couple of weeks or so, because already we're hitting into March, where the club will already need to be, you feel, making those plans for next season in terms of pre-season and what is going on there, which sounds crazy because we're already, hitting March, which just shows you how quick this season has gone. As I know for many out there, as frustrating it has been. Dave, I'll come around to you on this point. 3 areas you feel Spurs need to really take stock in the summer. I suppose this is obviously regardless of who's here, who isn't when it comes to managerial right now, but players alone. We'll just get Dave to unmute if we can from his side.
Sorry, my bad. I was having a flawless show up until then. But I think, look, you start with goalkeeper. I think, that's pretty much set with Kinski, Vicario, and Brandon Austin. I think Whiteman and Forrester's contract are coming up at the end of the season. So I think they'll probably be moved on, which frees up space in the squad. Then you move into the back line. I think Davies' contract is coming up at the end of this season. There hasn't really been too much around discussions around his future.
They have reportedly got a trigger option on him. Whether they use it or not is another question. Apparently, they've got a trigger option on Davies for a further year if they want to take it up. Apparently,
I just wonder, are they going to with how much he is on, how much we pay him in wages right now? I think it's up around 85K a week. They've done good work getting a lot of the high wages off the books in years gone by, and I just wonder, will they keep him around or not? It's a difficult one to know what they're going to do with Ben Davies, but regardless, I still think we need a left-sided centre-back and another left-back. I would be happy to let someone like Radu Dragic move on in the summer from that back line, especially with the emergence of Danzo. But I think a defender on the left side is very, very important moving forward. I think when you go into midfield, personally, I don't see the club going after a number 6 this summer. I think when you look at the way we've tried to address that position in seasons gone by, like say Conor Gallagher and stuff, I think that tells me they're going to look for maybe another number 8. I think the new contract for Rodrigo Bentancur and Archie Gray coming in there as well. I think that's where they're going to play, especially if it's under Ange Postecoglou moving forward. I think, which then means Basuma's contract is up in 2026. It doesn't look like they're going to extend that anytime soon. I think he's probably on the chopping block out of that midfield, and I'd expect another energetic sort of midfielder to be brought in here. And then that brings me to the forward line. I mean, Werner will be gone, hopefully, so that frees up another space, which is absolutely brilliant. But for me, I think you need good competition, if not bringing a better player than Brennan Johnson, and show Brennan Johnson the levels that he needs to drag his game to. For the right-hand side, I think that's a massive problem. And I would also agree with Mitch in terms of selling Richarlison and bringing in another striker. For me, if you're not going to go after it for someone like a Gyökeres or a Vlahovic, I would be very happy with someone like Liam Delap, who I think has proven his work this season. I think I'd be delighted with someone like him. But that's the thing. I don't think we're too far off. I think 5 good players this summer in the right positions of a certain quality will really push us on. Now, it all comes about whether Johan Lang is going to be the guy in charge going forward or Paratici. I think if Paratici comes back in, he's the guy to do it. I think if Johan Lang's still here, I think, unfortunately, we're going to be upset again next season. I think we'll miss the mark again because he hasn't proven he can get what we need. That's why we're in half of this mess in the first place.
It's interesting you say that, Dave, because there was reports recently that AC Milan are eyeing a move for Paratici when eventually his ban does come to an end, which I think it's in July. I think July 2025 is when that ban does come to an end. So it will be intriguing because I know many have seen Paratici kind of pacing the walls at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in recent months, but it'd be interesting how that works because you just feel at the moment that the fact Levy had to go on a plane with Langer to try and close the Tell deal maybe shows you already the kind of feeling there is there, and whether that's an underminement of what Langer can do when it comes to trying to secure some of those bigger players that Paratici did seem to get over the line. But then again, we've seen players under Paratici not so much work out. So who knows with Spurs' recruitment? Vass, come over to you. God, Vass, I've known you for a very, very long time, and I think between mine and your podcast, if we signed every player that we spoke about, we'd have about 400 players.
Probably.
But the
Chelsea
time,
light, wouldn't we?
We would be. I mean, Jason at one point said we needed 17 new players, and then he told me it was 21 last week. So,
no.
what do we need, Vass? What do you think we need? I mean, manager aside, right now, looking at the squad independently, what do you think we need for you to be in a good position for next season?
I love the way Dave said that we're almost there, but we only need 5 more players.
Isn't it Tottenham? So Tottenham.
Yeah, listen, last summer I said we needed a good number 6, and I still believe that. Yeah, I think whilst our forward line and even our defence cops a lot of flack, I think our issues have been in midfield. We've been unable to protect our back line in midfield as we should, and we've got players who have been fearful of breaking the lines and making forward passes for our attackers and depriving them of service. I think if you can cure that element of your side, you suddenly fix a number of things. So that's critical for me. I mean, if I was in charge of Spurs, I'd be throwing 80 million at Crystal Palace and trying to get Wharton over.
Good player.
Yeah,
Really good
and
player.
then maybe follow up the Cardoso links as well. Why not? You know, I'd ship Bissouma out because I don't think he's doing what we need him to do. Availability is an issue. Consistency is certainly an issue.
Yep.
So midfield for me is critical. I agree. Also, I can't remember who said it, whether it's Mitch or Dave, but left-sided centre back and left back is an area I think that we still need to look at. I think Mickey van der Ven is going to have perennial hamstring issues. I think his build, his speed, the way he plays, it's going to be a constant problem. We need another left-sided centre back for me. And Udogie, I know he's only just come back from injury. I don't think he's had the best of seasons. I think his form has dipped significantly. And his concentration levels, he's losing players on the far post. Defensively, I'm not sure if he's at it. So I think we need another left back, or maybe get another right back and you can play Spence there. So full back is an issue. Number 6 is an issue. Left centre back. All areas to address. And yeah, I mean, okay, this is going way beyond the 3 players now. Now I'm thinking about it. But Richarlison, massive problem. You know, the best ability is availability. And if you're not available, then you're not helping anybody. So cash in, bring another forward. Dave mentioned Liam Delap. I think Man City still got a buyback option on him. Could be a potential there. Werner, he's got to go. So we can see maybe if Postecoglou believes in Hyuk on Odobert. We spent a lot of money on Odobert. He's had a bad season, sadly, through injury. So maybe he'll come good. But then Tell is an interesting one. Because for me, he's not really looking like a number 9 at the moment. Perhaps
not a Premier League one, is he, Vass? Not a
Premier League one. Maybe it's early days. We've just chucked him in. He hasn't played much football for Bayern for different reasons. So he's still trying to find his feet. But I think he could fix one of the wide forward areas, maybe on the right instead of Johnson. Maybe Mikey Moore is that guy who fixes that side. I don't know. But we've got options everywhere else, I think. So maybe getting a forward, a central midfielder, absolutely number 1 priority for me. And then trying to get a player who can play either left centre back and left back. That would be ideal.
I was going to ask you, Vass, because you haven't mentioned him. I thought I'd just stop mentioning him as well, is Pedro Porro. Do you think Porro will come good? He's played a lot of games this season. I think when you look at the games played, he's played more than most this season, Pedro Porro. So you can make an allowance for being overtired. I think where fans have had frustration, certainly recently with Porro, is that defensively, he seems either further advanced than any other player at times when he's meant to be the fullback. Or his concentration. I mean, you mentioned Udogie there. You could say to agree the same times for Porro. The same times for Porro as well. Look, I don't want Porro sold. I think he's a fantastic option for the club. I just wonder whether you could use Porro maybe further forward rather than as a defender. Am I crazy about that, Vass, or what's your take on Porro?
It's an option for sure. I think he is overplayed. And, you know, is his defensive frailties down to him, or is it down to Ange's system? Or is it down to the fact that the midfielders aren't covering in those spaces when he does get forward? You know, Brendan Johnson's not the best cover defensively. And, you know, if Sarr isn't playing, who can run all day, Sarr can cover those areas, whereas some of the others can't, like Bentancur and maybe Bissouma get pulled more central. So it could be a system thing. I think we need to have the full-back flexibility in getting more bodies that we can rely on so that Porro can be rotated and rested. And I think the emergence of Jed Spence allows us that. But at the moment, Jed Spence is covering both left back and right back. Perhaps once we get the centre back situation sorted, Archie Gray can fix the right back area, because that's where he played for Leeds for most of the season. Everyone keeps talking about him as our answer to the number 6 role. I personally don't see it, because even if that is his strong position, he's barely played there for 2 years. I don't know. Maybe he is eventually, but for right now, I think we need a really good number 6.
Yeah. The good news is, Vass, we've had you back on, and we've not lost the game. So that's been a first.
Yeah,
that's been a first and a while. I always implore the listeners and viewers, please go and listen to Dr Tottenham podcast, one of the quickest podcasts to drop after a game. Where can they find you, Vass? If they don't know where to find you, where can they find you?
Anywhere you get your podcast, basically. I mean, we've got a YouTube channel as well, so go link and subscribe to that. But yeah, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts for audio, is they're all there. And we're on social media. We're not as active as Last Word on Spurs for sure, but yeah, give us a follow there as well, and you can be updated.
We love you very much, Vass. Thank you. I mean, I would say one of the more very famous faces and voices left on X at the moment. He'll then tell me he's probably left next week and move to Blue Sky. So,
well, I'm already on Blue Sky. Yeah. I've kind of shifted over there, so I'm sort of splitting my time. But I find myself using social media less and less these days. I don't know whether it's the way the season's gone or what, but yeah, there you are.
It's been tough. We've lost another same one to Blue Sky, but keep make sure you're checking him on YouTube and the podcast scene. The wonderful Vass Koni. Vass, thank you ever so much. I will ask a final question to everyone as I'm looking to close here. Vass, can Tottenham win the Europa League? Will they win the Europa League?
They can win the Europa League. Whether they will or not, I'm not going to commit to that question, Ricky. You know me and predictions.
I know you don't.
I'm the kiss of death a lot of times. So, yeah, it's got to be our focus. That's all I'm going to say. I'm desperate for us to win it.
Of course, yeah.
Have been for a number of months, in all honesty. My focus has been in that tournament for a while now. So I'm just hoping we can pull it off. Fingers crossed.
Amen. Vass, you're a star. Thank you so much. Got to say, it's so much nicer doing these shows when they're pre-recorded. So much more calmer. Mitch, lovely to have you back on. Thank you so much. Please go and make sure you're checking all of Mitch's content out over, of course, on YouTube. You can find him, Mitch Fretton. Just type his name in there. Mitch, lovely to have you back. I've got the same question to you. How confident are you for the Europa League? And how nice is it to be recording on a weekend where Spurs haven't affected us to some degree?
Oh, it's lovely, Ricky. It's really, really nice. We can just go and enjoy our weekends, and football can be at the back of the mind.
Can't they just stick to midweeks and let us have weekends off? That'd be so much easier.
Exactly. No, but thank you for having me back on. It's been a really great show. Thank you to Dave and Vass as well. It's been brilliant. But yeah, of course we can. We can win the Europa League. Absolutely. Will we win the Europa League?
That's another question.
I'm going to say yes until we can't. And unless we go over to the Netherlands next week and find ourselves 2-0 down or so after the first leg, I'll be very, very confident in our chances to go through these knockout stages. Right to Bilbao, because I want to have an excuse to spend the money on a plane ticket or whatever it is and go over to Bilbao for the Europa League final, whether I'm in the stadium or not. So I'm holding on to that thought. But yeah, I'll go 2 yeses for now, because it's all we've got left to play for this season, and you need something to hold on to and still have hope for.
Mitch, you're a star. Listen, look forward to having you back on really, really soon. Dave, let's close with you. Always can find him over at the Irish Hotspur on the match days. That's always keeping you entertained and giving you much, much more as always. Dee, what do you think? You know, we've asked this question so many times on this show that I asked a couple of months. Can we win it? Will we win it? You gave a bullish kind of shake your head there when you said we're not going to be 2-0 down to 80 out. That looked very confident, Dave. Is it quite brave to be doing like that, or what do you think?
Nah, look, I think we beat Alkmaar handy enough. Mikey Moore turned it on for 45 minutes against them in the group stage, and we ended up beating them. So I think with much more serious players out there, I think we get over the line against Alkmaar. Look, I thought it was written in the stars, because Irish Ferries actually opened up a new route from Rosslare straight into the Basque region. So there's my trip to Bilbao sorted if we do make it. So I sort of thought it was written in the stars. But I just feel like we'll probably get to the semi-final. We'll probably come unstuck against the manager that is more of a wily tactician maybe than Ange Postecoglou. And I think maybe changes it up in games, and that's probably seals our fate. That's where I think we'll come unstuck, unfortunately. I think semi-final is where we'll go.
I thought you were going to say, Dave.
I want us to win it. I want us to win.
I thought you were going to say, Dave, we're going to get stuck by a manager that's in prison and beat us. I thought we've already had that happen once already in Europe. We can't have that happen again twice in the space of 6 years, surely. Honestly, what a football club.
We're a club of many firsts, Ricky. Unfortunately, not the ones we want.
I know, sick of, I'd love to finish first for the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons, God, in the stats. Listen, I want to say a massive thank you to this wonderful panel that have overseen us having non-involvement in the FA Cup. We wish we were still involved. We're not. I want to say a massive thank you. Please go like and subscribe and follow and listen and view the Dr. Tottenham podcast. Vass, thank you so much. Go and make sure you're liking, you're subscribing, you're watching Mitch Fretton over on the YouTube, and the same with, of course, Dave over at the Irish Hotspur. We have been the last one on Spurs, on a more calmer, composed show where Spurs haven't ruined our weekend. Let's see what next week brings. Massive week in store. Thank you so much, as always, for your support. And as always, come on, you Spurs.